He wasn't the strongest soldier, or even the best marksman. But on a frozen morning in 1944, one Allied sniper pulled out a tiny mirror, something every instructor said was useless, and used it to shoot faster than any German sniper. Alive, what happened next shocked both armies. World War II created battlefields unlike anything Europe had seen in centuries. Across the Eastern Front's frozen plains, the dense forests of the Ardennes, the shattered streets of Stalingrad, and the hedgerows of Normandy, snipers became silent arbiters of life and death. Their world was not defined by sweeping offensives or roaring tanks, but by stillness, a kind of predatory patience measured in hours, sometimes days, where a single blink could decide who lived and who did. Not. By 1941, every major army understood the value of precision shooters, yet none approached the discipline with the intensity seen on the Eastern Front. The Red Army and the Wehrmacht developed sniper programs that were brutal in their simplicity. A sniper was expected to disappear into terrain, observe without being observed, and strike without warning. German doctrine emphasized technical mastery. The Wehrmacht invested heavily in optics, producing the ZF-39 and other telescopic sights that remained stable even in extreme conditions. German snipers, many drawn from experienced hunters and marksmen, were trained to fire no more than a few shots a day, each one calculated, purposeful, meant to sow uncertainty in enemy ranks. The Soviet Union approached sniping with a different philosophy, a combination of mass training and battlefield necessity. After catastrophic losses in 1941, Soviet commanders leaned heavily on snipers to slow advancing German units. Schools in places like Vyshnyaky and Podolsk trained men and women, teaching them camouflage, endurance, and psychology. Historical figures such as Vasily Zaitsev and Lyudmila Pavlichenko demonstrated how a single sniper could change the tempo of entire engagements, turning ruined cities into lethal hunting grounds. Across Western Europe, Allied sniper programs evolved under different pressures. British forces refined their marksmanship schools, focusing on concealment and observation. Canadian snipers, drawing from traditions of wilderness shooting, became some of the war's most effective long-range marksmen. Known for steady discipline and exceptional field craft, American doctrine initially lagged behind. Before 1942, the U.S. Army lacked standardized sniper training, and many units improvised with scoped M1903 rifles. But as the war intensified, specialized schools emerged, producing marksmen capable of holding ground in France, Italy, and the Pacific. No matter the uniform, the environment defined the sniper's world. In ruined cities like Ortona and Stalingrad, snipers operated from collapsed factories, upper floors of burnt-out apartments, and concealed holes carved into rubble piles. Every shattered window became a potential firing point. Every quiet street carried the threat of an unseen rifle barrel. Soldiers learned to fear the sudden crack of a single rifle, a sound that meant someone had been watched long before the bullet arrived. In the forests of the Ardennes, winter snow amplified the danger. A boot print, a breath cloud, or the faintest glint of metal could give away a sniper's position. Many remained motionless for hours, their bodies stiffening in sub-zero temperatures. The physical toll was immense: numb limbs, frostbite, dehydration, and the mental strain of absolute silence. Snipers often worked alone or in pairs, relying on intense concentration and the ability to remain calm while surrounded by endless uncertainty. This was a battlefield shaped not by sweeping tactical maneuvers, but by a constant duel of patience and perception. The enemy was rarely seen until the instant he fired, and in this world ruled by shadows, every sniper, Allied or German, knew one truth: survival depended on adaptation. The advantage belonged not to the strongest or even the most skilled, but to the one who learned faster than the person aiming back. In every army of the Second World War, there were soldiers who arrived at the front without the reputation, confidence, or pedigree of elite fighters. The sniper at the center of this story was one of them, an anonymous marksman shaped not by talent, but by circumstance. He came from the kind of background common to thousands of men: ordinary labor, limited formal training, and no expectation of becoming a specialist on the battlefield. When he first entered the sniper program, he quickly understood he was not among the prodigies. Many around him had grown up hunting, competing in marksmanship clubs, or had natural steadiness under pressure. He lacked that initial precision. In training, others consistently grouped their shots tighter and adapted faster to wind, distance, and recoil. Instructors noted his reliability, but not brilliance. He was never the top candidate, never the first choice for difficult missions, and rarely recognized for exceptional skill. Yet he possessed qualities that didn't always register on evaluation sheets. He was methodical, observant, and willing to test ideas others dismissed. Where gifted shooters relied on instinct, he studied technique. Where others trusted their first shot, he learned to question angles, reflections, and the smallest irregularities in terrain. He compensated for slow reaction times by building routines for faster target acquisition. Over time, those habits became survival tools. His internal conflict shaped every decision he made, the tension between knowing he was not the best and understanding that he still had to succeed. Sniper warfare punished hesitation, yet he couldn't rely on raw talent to carry him. What he did have was determination to protect the men beside him, a squad that depended on every forward position being safe before they advanced. For him, sniping was not about heroism or rivalry. It was about staying alive long enough to bring others home. That pressure, more than anything, pushed him to search for unconventional methods. In a battlefield dominated by expert German marksmen, he needed more than standard training. He needed an edge no one else had considered worth trying. By the early years of the Second World War, German snipers had set a standard feared across both the Eastern and Western fronts. The Wehrmacht entered the conflict with a deeply rooted shooting culture. German hunters, gamekeepers, and sports marksmen formed a significant part of the sniper pool, bringing with them years of precision shooting long before they ever wore a uniform. Their training emphasized patience, discipline, and the psychological value of a single, perfectly executed shot. One of their greatest advantages lay in equipment. Germany produced some of the most advanced sniper optics of the era, including the ZF-39 scope mounted on the Karabiner 98K. These scopes were rugged, clear, and reliable, even in extreme weather. The combination of superior optics and carefully chosen ammunition allowed German snipers to engage targets swiftly and accurately at distances where many Allied shooters struggled to see fine details. Their camouflage techniques, honed through both doctrine and field experience, made them nearly invisible in forests, villages, and urban ruins. German sniper detachments were also given considerable autonomy. They were encouraged to operate ahead of main lines, selecting their own positions and firing only when certain of impact. This discipline produced high kill ratios during the early war years. In battles from France in 1940 to the opening phases of Operation Barbarossa, German snipers frequently recorded multiple confirmed kills in a single day. They targeted officers, radio operators, medics, and machine gun crews, creating disruption far beyond the casualties themselves. The psychological effect was immense. Allied units quickly learned to fear the quiet sectors of the front, where nothing moved and yet men fell without warning. A single shot could halt an entire platoon's advance. Soldiers described the sense of being watched, the dread of stepping into an open doorway, the silence that followed a precise impact. Even experienced officers hesitated to expose themselves, knowing that a German marksman might have spent hours studying the angle of a single window or trench line. For the unnamed Allied sniper, these German shooters represented the highest level of the craft, patient, technically superior, and almost impossible to detect. Facing them meant competing not just with better equipment, but with years of refined doctrine. To match them with standard methods was nearly impossible. Allied troops respected their lethality, but they also understood that matching such precision required innovation, not imitation. This looming threat hung over every mission he undertook. German snipers dominated the battlefield with technique and technology. If he hoped to survive their gaze, he would need something entirely different, something that didn't rely on talent alone. Combat on the sniper lines often revealed truths that training grounds could never prepare a marksman for. During one particularly harsh operation on the European front, the kind of forward movement that forced infantry to cross open terrain under scattered resistance, the Allied sniper finally confronted the full scale of the imbalance between his abilities and those of the German marksmen opposing him. As troops advanced through a partially wooded valley, the first shot came from a German position so well hidden that no one saw the muzzle flash. A single round struck its target instantly. Within moments, another soldier fell. The shots were spaced only seconds apart. German doctrine emphasized rapidly eliminating exposed targets before they could react, and their snipers executed this with ruthless precision from his own firing position. The Allied marksman struggled to match the pace. Every engagement required him to go through a sequence of small but time-consuming adjustments, locating the glint of an enemy scope, refining focus through his own optics, compensating for the morning light filtering unevenly through branches, and estimating how a light crosswind might nudge the bullet at varying ranges. These calculations demanded calm and time, to things the battlefield rarely offered. Worse, firing the first shot always came with consequences: a sniper's muzzle, flash, recoil movement, or the disturbance of nearby foliage could betray his position. German marksmen, trained to fire, relocate, and fire again before counter-snipers could respond, held the advantage in both speed and concealment. Maintaining stealth after a single round became nearly impossible for someone who required longer to reacquire a target. As casualties mounted and enemy fire continued with unnerving accuracy, an unsettling realization took hold. The gap between his performance and that of the German shooters was not simply about talent. It was technical. Their superior optics, refined muscle memory, and quicker sight acquisition allowed them to fire almost immediately after identifying a target. He, by contrast, remained tied to a slower, more vulnerable process. The pressure of this disparity grew into something more than frustration. On a battlefield where seconds determined survival, adapting wasn't optional. If he continued relying solely on conventional methods, he would eventually be outmaneuvered or killed by a faster, more efficient marksman. The front line did not reward hesitation. It demanded innovation. The breakthrough came not during a mission, but in a rare moment of stillness behind the lines. The infantry had halted near a cluster of ruined farm structures, their walls shattered by artillery and their floors littered with debris. As the sniper waited for orders, sunlight began to creep over the broken timbers, scattering sharp reflections across the ground. One fragment of glass, no larger than a coin, caught his attention. When the wind shifted, the reflection moved across a section of wall without exposing the source. It was a simple optical effect, light bouncing from one surface to another. But in that instant, it became something more than a passing observation. Without lifting his head or adjusting his body, he could see angles that were otherwise hidden. He crouched, testing the piece of glass in his hand. By tilting it slightly, he could observe the terrain ahead while keeping his position completely concealed. Adjusting it further, he found that the reflection aligned roughly with the direction of his rifle barrel. It wasn't precise, but it offered something he had never experienced on the battlefield: the ability to pre-orient his weapon without exposing himself to counter-sniper fire. The idea was unconventional, bordering on absurd by strict military standards. When he attempted to explain it to members of his squad, the reaction was immediate. Some laughed. One dismissed it outright with a remark common among soldiers faced with unorthodox suggestions: WWII idea high. But he persisted. He wasn't looking for approval. What he sought was a way to reduce the seconds he normally lost to visual adjustments. Seconds that German snipers routinely exploited. If a reflective surface could guide his rifle into a general alignment before he exposed his eye to the scope, he could shorten the most dangerous phase of his firing process. He began experimenting with shards of metal, broken mirror pieces, and polished fragments of glass scavenged from damaged buildings. By holding the reflective surface low and to the side, he could check the direction of his barrel, compare it with visible terrain features, and prepare his rifle for near-instant fine-tuning once he rose into position. No training manual mentioned such a method. No sniper school endorsed it. But the battlefield had shown him a truth that doctrine never addressed. Innovation often came from necessity, not tradition. The idea was unrefined, fragile, and easy to mock. Yet it offered something he desperately needed: a way to narrow the gap between himself and the German marksmen who operated with lethal efficiency. The next time he went forward, he carried the small piece of mirror with him. It was an experiment born out of pressure, survival instinct, and the willingness to try something others would never consider. Whether it would work in real combat remained to be seen. The first real test came during a reconnaissance push near a partially collapsed ridgeline, the kind of terrain German snipers favored for its elevated sightlines. The unit moved cautiously, knowing enemy marksmen had been active in the area for days. No one could pinpoint their positions, only the aftermath: two wounded scouts and a halted advance. The sniper found cover behind a fractured stone wall and quietly unfolded the tiny mirror shard. Holding it low, he tilted it until the reflection caught the distant slope. Through the distorted, shimmering surface, He scanned for the telltale signs of a sniper's presence, a faint glint from a scope lens, the subtle shadow of a helmet edge, or the dark circle of a rifle barrel emerging between rocks. For the first time, he could observe without lifting his head into open view. He adjusted the mirror until his rifle barrel aligned roughly with a cluster of debris on the opposite ridge. A brief flash appeared, the unmistakable reflection of German optics catching a sliver of sun. Normally, this discovery would trigger a long process, raising the rifle, adjusting his cheek weld, centering the target, compensating for wind, and recalibrating after each micro-movement. This time, the groundwork was already done. His weapon was oriented, his position stable, and the distance roughly gauged through previous observation. The German sniper shifted, revealing a narrow slice of his firing point. In that fraction of a second, the window German marksmen usually exploited, the Allied sniper acted first. He rose just enough to bring his eye to the scope, made a minor final correction, and squeezed the trigger. The shot struck instantly. No second attempt, no prolonged standoff. Men nearby froze, stunned by the speed. A position that had threatened the advance for hours was neutralized in a heartbeat. For the first time, he was faster, decisively faster, than a German sniper. Approximately 300 words. What began as a simple reflective aid soon evolved into a structured method. The mirror became more than a tool for spotting glints. It became the backbone of a new workflow. By adjusting the angle of reflection and identifying fixed landmarks in the distance, he could estimate range before ever looking through the scope. Calibrating distance no longer required repeated exposure. The mirror allowed him to approximate target zones from complete cover. He used the reflective surface to scan blind angles, studying areas that would normally demand head movement or torso exposure. Subtle shifts in shadow patterns, faint barrel silhouettes, or disturbed snow became readable indicators. This reduced time spent reorienting his rifle and gave him near-instant context for targets. Emerging from concealment. Prediction followed naturally. By mapping the terrain's reflective image, he could anticipate likely firing points, expected movement paths, and escape routes. When machine gun crews relocated or when German snipers attempted flanking maneuvers, he was already oriented toward them before they appeared. Stealth improved as well. Without repeatedly raising his head to scan, his silhouette remained unseen. Even after firing, he required minimal repositioning, conserving precious seconds that German marksmen relied on for counterfire. As engagements increased, results became impossible to ignore. Positions that normally took minutes to neutralize fell within moments. He eliminated snipers, forward observers, and machine gun nests at a pace his unit had never witnessed. His ability to strike before the enemy completed their own readiness cycle created a ripple of murmurs across the line. Soldiers talked quietly about the marksmen who hit targets faster than the Germans. Some called it luck, others called it instinct. But those who watched him work understood the truth. He had built a new system, one that turned a tiny piece of mirror into a battlefield advantage no manual had ever envisioned. As the front lines shifted and engagements intensified, a disturbing pattern emerged across several sectors of the German positions. Snipers who normally dominated the battlefield began falling. Before they even fired a shot, they were experienced marksmen, men trained to wait, evaluate, and strike with flawless timing. Yet now, they were being killed in the very moments they prepared to pull the trigger. Reports from forward units described the same sequence: a sniper taking up position, adjusting his sights, preparing the shot, and then a sudden impact. No visible muzzle flash, no time to react. German commanders initially attributed it to chance, assuming Allied patrols had stumbled upon hidden firing points. But the consistency of the losses told a different story. Within days, anxiety spread through the ranks. Veteran marksmen, normally composed and methodical, began hesitating. Some changed positions repeatedly, convinced they were under observation. Others complained that they felt exposed the moment they set their rifles down. Their confidence, once the backbone of German defensive tactics, began to erode. Officers on the ground started to suspect that the Allies had introduced new equipment. Rumors circulated of advanced optics, improved spotter gear, or even experimental detection devices. The unexplained precision of the counterfire fed these theories. German doctrine relied heavily on the assumption that their snipers controlled the pace of engagements. Now, someone was matching and surpassing their speed. Allied troops noticed the change as well. For the first time, patrols moved with slightly less fear. Positions previously dominated by unseen German rifles became accessible. The reason was simple. One Allied sniper had begun to alter the rhythm of the battlefield. By using the reflective surface to pre-align his rifle and anticipate movement, he consistently fired before his opponents finished their own process. 2. The Germans, it felt as if someone was reading their minds, predicting their setups and eliminating them before they could execute a single shot. What they didn't know was that the battlefield had become a kind of chessboard, one where the Allied sniper operated several moves ahead. His tiny mirror, dismissed as a trivial object, allowed him to break the long-held advantage German sharpshooters enjoyed. For the first time, they faced an opponent who outpaced them at their own craft, and it shook their confidence to the core. The decisive moment came during a major engagement in a ruined town scarred by artillery and winter frost. Thick fog settled over broken rooftops and collapsed walls, giving the German forces an ideal environment to deploy multiple coordinated sniper teams. Their goal was simple: halt the Allied push by targeting officers and machine gun crews. The moment visibility improved, the Allied sniper squad entered the outskirts carefully, knowing they were walking into a layered trap. The Germans had positioned their marksmen in staggered elevations, upper floors, rubble mounds, and partially standing attics. Each position covered another, creating overlapping kill zones designed to eliminate anyone attempting to cross the open square at the town's center. Before the fog thinned, the sniper used his mirror to map the terrain. By tilting it across shattered windows and fractured stone, he located likely positions based on angles, shadows, and structural lines. Each reflection gave him a new piece of the puzzle: a barrel silhouette here, a faint glint there, a disturbed patch of dust where someone had recently crawled into position. When the fog finally lifted, the German snipers prepared to fire their opening volley. But the Allied marksman was already oriented toward them. His first shot struck the highest vantage point. Without repositioning his head, he shifted only his hands, using the mirror to confirm his next alignment. The second shot followed almost immediately. Then a third, within minutes. The coordinated German teams collapsed, each sniper eliminated before completing a single effective engagement. His squad, expecting heavy casualties, advanced through the square untouched. What his comrades had once mocked as a childish experiment had just saved an entire infantry push. The story spread quickly. The sniper who used a mirror, the trick everyone dismissed, had turned what should have been a deadly crossfire into a clean breakthrough. War has often rewarded those willing to step outside established methods. Throughout history, breakthroughs rarely came from the most gifted or celebrated individuals, but from those who refused to accept limitations as permanent. The mirror method reflected this broader truth. It was not a product of extraordinary talent, but of necessity, a response to a faster, better equipped opponent. In wartime, fear becomes a form of pressure that shapes decision-making. Soldiers adapt not because they seek glory, but because survival depends on finding solutions where none seem available. Creativity emerges from the cracks of desperation. When equipment falls short, when doctrine no longer applies, when the difference between life and death is measured in seconds. Small ideas, minor adjustments, improvisations, and unorthodox tactics often have outsized effect. A reflective shard of glass, insignificant under normal circumstances, became the key to reversing an entire dynamic on the battlefield. It shortened the reaction cycle, undermined an enemy advantage, and allowed one marksman to shift from vulnerable to dominant. Through it all, the sniper remained grounded. He never viewed the mirror trick as a personal triumph. There were no boasts, no claims of special insight. He saw it as a practical solution to a practical problem. A technique developed because hesitation meant losing comrades, and failure meant death. His innovation was not born from ambition, but from an instinct shared by countless soldiers throughout history. The drive to stay alive and keep others alive. In that sense, his story echoed a universal truth of warfare. Progress often arises not from sweeping technological revolutions, but from quiet, small acts of adaptation performed by individuals whose names rarely enter official records. He never sought recognition. His reward was simpler: the knowledge that a piece of broken glass helped bring his squad home. In the months that followed, the mirror technique never appeared in official manuals, never entered formal doctrine, and never reached the level of standardized training. Yet it spread quietly, passed from soldier to soldier in briefings, trenches, and dugouts. Marksmen who witnessed its effectiveness began experimenting with their own versions, polishing spent cartridge bases, carrying small metal fragments, or breaking off reflective pieces from damaged vehicles. The idea traveled informally across units, a battlefield lesson shared through observation rather than instruction. As the war continued, adaptations emerged across different fronts. Some snipers used reflections as part of pre-aiming routines. Others incorporated them into range estimation or blind angle scanning. In urban combat, where visibility was fractured and sightlines unpredictable, reflective tools became a way to look around corners without exposing a profile. In wooded terrain, they helped read sunlight patterns and anticipate hidden firing points. Even after the war ended, echoes of the method appeared in conflicts where speed and concealment remained critical. In Korea, Vietnam, and later asymmetric engagements, small mirrors and reflective surfaces were occasionally used by reconnaissance teams and sharpshooters for terrain mapping and pre-alignment, not as formal doctrine, but as a field expedient trick learned through necessity. The principle remained the same: shorten the moment of vulnerability between detection and firing. The original sniper never claimed ownership of the idea. He never viewed it as a revolutionary technique, only a solution crafted under pressure on days when the German lines seemed unbreakable. His contribution was modest, almost anonymous, a reminder that many advancements in warfare begin not in laboratories or command centers, but in the hands of ordinary individuals confronted with extraordinary circumstances. In the broader story of World War II, his mirror was a minor detail, yet for the soldiers whose lives depended on those extra seconds, it became something far more important. It demonstrated how survival can hinge on a shift in perspective, literally and figuratively, and how innovation often emerges from the simplest objects in the harshest moments. His legacy endures not in records or medals, but in the quiet truth embedded in every battlefield where improvisation saves lives. Sometimes, the simplest idea, one tiny mirror, can change everything. If stories like this remind you how small moments can reshape entire battles, and how forgotten soldiers changed history in ways we rarely hear about, then you're in the right place. For more untold wartime innovations, hidden tactics, and human stories buried in the archives, subscribe and join the community. And if you want this channel to keep bringing you rare, overlooked chapters of history, like the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and share it with someone who appreciates the past as much as you do. History is full of simple ideas that changed everything, and the next one is coming in the next episode.